Y'all ready to be history?
Get started.
Welcome.
Hi.
Hello, everyone.
To the Pro Audio Suite.
These guys are professional. They're motivated.
Thanks to TriBooth, the best vocal booth for home or on-the-road voice recording. And Austrian Audio, making passion heard. Introducing Robert Marshall from Source Elements and Someone Audio Post, Chicago. Darren Robbo Robertson from Voodoo Radio Imaging, Sydney. Tech to the VO Stars, George the Tech Whittam from LA. And me, Andrew Peters, voiceover talent and home studio guy.
Line up, learner!
Here we go.
And welcome to another Pro Audio Suite, thanks to Austrian Audio, making passion heard, and TriBooth. Don't forget the code TRIPAP200 to get $200 off your TriBooth. Now, talking audio, quality of audio. There's actually been studies done because things are getting a bit sort of wobbly in the quality stakes, but it appears that it has some knock-on effect if your audio is not up to speed. So, Robbo, you've been reading a few articles on this. What's the story?
Yeah, look, I've been doing a bit of reading up on it because it's something that's sort of dear to my heart. And there's the one that I'll go back to, and the one that's probably worth talking about the most goes back to 2018, but it's still very relevant. It was a study that was commissioned between the Australian National University and the USC, which I believe is the University of Southern California. And what they did was they were looking into the link between audio quality and its believability. So in other words, when we listen to something, does the quality of the audio affect how much or whether we actually believe it at all? Actually turns out that it does, and there's actually quite a close link there. So basically, just quickly, what they did was they took a couple of YouTube videos that they were using for educational purposes at the university, and they screwed with the quality. So they took a 2 or 3 minute grab. Some were pristine quality, some they screwed with it and made it hard to understand. Some they took little chunks out and had little audio glitches, and they gave it to, they don't mention how many participants, but it was a whole bunch of participants. And effectively, long story short, what it proved was, yes, absolutely, that the less the audio was understandable, the harder it was for people to believe what they were actually hearing. At a time when audiobooks, as we were talking about before this episode and all that sort of stuff, are becoming more and more prevalent, and you want people to believe what you're saying, it's probably some pretty good research to be looking at. I'll post the links along with this because it goes much deeper, and I'm just giving you a glossy 5-second podcast overview, but it's really worth reading. It really is.
I would love to read that.
Well, it's interesting. I always think, that Stephen Fry read all of the Harry Potter books. Imagine the difference if it was done with like an AI or something. There's no way in the world you get immersed into Harry Potter.
Have you ever watched Star Wars with the sound down? Boring as batshit.
Yeah.
It's just
It's pretty silly.
It doesn't work. It's just do yourself a favor, turn the volume down and make a stupid lightsaber noise. Or get your kids to and say, kids, when the lightsaber turns on, what's that sound like?
Pew, 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 pew. Yeah.
Exactly.
Pew, pew.
It's like it's a no-brainer. It really is, and we know it. But there are people out there who I don't think want to believe it. I think that's the.
We all know that video without audio is just surveillance. So it's just kind of it's just the gray area in between that,
This came up in discussion because I consult a ton of audiobook narrators along the way, and some of them are very new, and some of them come from voiceover. Some of them have been coached by other folks, et cetera, et cetera. And what I've come away with is that those that coach how to record an audiobook, and this isn't like, let's be specific, this is really more about how to self-produce an audiobook as opposed to just how to narrate an audiobook. There are certainly courses and classes you can take on how to produce an audiobook, right? There's platforms out there for rights holders to seek out narrators. And so they hire a narrator, essentially, in a way. Some of them don't. Some do it for spec. But they get a narrator to narrate the audiobook, and the narrator's job is to literally produce the recording. So record, edit, proof, master it. Everything to get the final files delivered is all on the hands or in the hands of an audiobook narrator. And unfortunately, in a lot of cases, these are often very, very new to audio production audiobook narrators because there's a very, very low bar to entry to get into doing this. And so there's coaches out there, and I'm not disparaging anyone because, again, I understand it can seem extremely out of reach to get great audio, and it would be easier just to get the audiobook specs correct, the proper peak levels and room tone levels, et cetera, and just, make sure you check all the boxes before you send the files, and, maybe it makes a little bit of money, but you don't realize how easy it is to do very minimal things to get much better audio. And I really feel like audio quality bars should be really raised for audiobooks. And here's the other thing is like those qualities that are passing now are for the current audiobook production standards and the audio distribution standards, right? Which are dramatically lower fidelity than any music streaming platform. Like listen to an audiobook and listen to a streaming platform, you'll hear the difference. It's dramatically different.
Yeah.
There's going to be a day where we actually have a demand for, because of things like what Darren said, Mr. Robbo, that there are reasons why we want to have much better sounding audio, that it actually really does matter in the way that we hear and the way that we believe and the way we're sucked into the story, et cetera, et cetera. And there may someday, I hope there is, an HD or a high definition quality version of audiobook publishing, something that really sounds great. So if you record everything and squash it down into garbage because audio quality doesn't all that matter, your stuff's going to be limited to, it's almost like, what if you recorded everything to sound good on AM radio in the 70s and all your master tapes sounded like an AM radio? And now you want to release that content again and it sounds like AM radio.
This happened with TV. Think about like all the TV shows, like whatever, even like some TV shows were shot direct to video back in the 80s when all the movies were shot to film. And then later on, everything gets moved up to HD and it's remastered. But all the stuff shot on video just looks like shit and will look like shit forever because it was caught on an inferior format that was good enough for the broadcast at the time. No one knew the difference. But now when you want to go back and watch, I don't know, Knight Rider, or I don't know if Knight Rider was when I think they did shoot some TV shows actually on film, but some of them just went straight to video or video edited, and it just looks like it.
Well, do you remember 60 Minutes, AP? I'm not sure about the States. I'm sure it was probably the same. But when 60 Minutes started here in Australia, they used to shoot it on 35mm.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's like that's those days are long gone.
But I remember guys going out, even location guys, like news guys. They'd be shooting on film, and the guy would be recording on using a Nagra to get the audio. Super high quality stuff.
That's right.
Not anymore.
So the thing is, though, a Nagra does sound great, but what also sounds great is a $100 Tascam handheld PCM flash recorder.
I don't think you had that back in the day of a Nagra, though. Like
no, I know, but I'm saying that the barrier to entry to get great audio 30, 40, 50 years ago was very costly and very, it was out of reach to normal people.
The difference now is process, not equipment.
Agreed.
The crappiest equipment. Even as we've done, you get amazing recording out of an iPhone, actually, if you just put it in the right place and have it in the right environment and blah, blah, blah. Like, it's what you do, not what you do it with.
Yeah.
So that's what gets me a little crazy is like when the thought is like, your job is hard enough. You're an audiobook narrator. You shouldn't have to worry about noises and other, room tone and just mic technique and all these. You don't need to worry about all that. It doesn't matter that much. Well, okay, I can argue that it doesn't in some ways, but in the end, is it going to elevate your career as an audiobook narrator if you do the minimum? No.
There's something else with an audiobook, which if it sounds like shit, it's going to be fatiguing to listen to. And that's one thing for like a commercial or something that's quick, but you're looking to engage people over hours.
Yeah.
And you're putting all this effort into something and you can't redo it. And so little effort is needed to make the recording proper compared to your performance and all the work and effort in reading it, that just put that little percentage into capturing it right so you don't regret having to do it again, basically.
Because audio to many people sounds like such a black art, that they think that, well, it's really hard. There's no way I can understand it, and why bother? So let's just get the, and it's like just a little bit of education and a little bit of practical stuff, and it's not that crazy stupid hard.
But it's funny, when it comes to video, those people will sit down for days and research how to get the best lighting in their room and how to, make their face look the best and how can I touch this up and fix this up. But when it comes to audio, it's like, it's as long as you can hear it. That's all.
They'll make it look great, and then they'll shoot it with the camera that's mounted on the microphone 40 feet away.
Yes, exactly.
And go like, why doesn't it sound good?
But that is true. But then I'm a huge YouTube consumer. I watch a lot of YouTube. The ones that you see on YouTube are not because you subscribe to them. That is not how YouTube works. YouTube will always show you the next video that the algorithm wants you to see, which is exactly like TikTok,
media. Exactly.
Instagram, etc. It's the same freaking thing. And the video it suggests you to watch is extremely well produced, really has great audio across the board. Like, it is rare to have a bad sounding or looking video get suggested, and that just shows you. Like, by the way, it really does matter.
I think one of the problems is people don't know what to listen for, and they always make the assumption that whatever it is that I'm hearing, A, I don't know what it is, and B, I have no idea how to get rid of it, and therefore, you can see the thing in the background and move it out of the way. But it's much harder to, have you ever played that game where you sit there and you listen and the people mention all the obvious stuff, like the air conditioner is buzzing and this and that. And you start eliminating things, but there's always something more to hear. And people don't listen in depth, and they just stop at the first two things they hear.
Mm-hmm. There's two things that makes me think of that. One is simply closing your eyes, right? So if you really want to improve your hearing, eliminate the sense of sight. People that have no eyesight have incredible hearing. In fact, there is a video, it's not even a joke, of a guy who's blind on a bicycle who's using echo location, like Robert was done. He's using echo cancellation, same thing that dolphins and bats use, to actually ride a bike, right? We're that good at hearing. So you take away the sight, your hearing immediately is magnified, and you will hear things that you didn't hear before. So that's one. Two is
gone out of your head.
Having better memory.
Two is after one and before three.
I had another one that was so great.
Did you see the one where the same kid, or there's a kid who rides a skateboard around? He's like going all over the place, and they get him inside, and they put objects on the table in front of him, and he can almost identify them, but he gets down to a pencil standing up, and he finally couldn't locate the pencil on the table, but a can of Coke and all kinds of stuff. He could just tell you what's on the table in front of him just by going like that.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Like, if you really do focus on hearing, you'd be amazed what you hear. I had a client the other day said, I had an audio interface on my desk in my booth. It was like an audience or something, but he had switched to an app, something else, an Apollo or something, right? So he's like, I finally removed it from the booth and I could hear the difference. And I was like, are you sure? He's like, it's like I put it back because I thought I was crazy, and I made like a hand clap, and I could hear the resonance of the sound bouncing off the audio interface, and I removed it. And I was like, there you go.
It's true.
Like everything in your, everything that has a flat reflective, or in the case of this gentleman, even if it's curved like a soda can, has a distinct reflection, and he can hear it, and you can hear it too. So hearing things isn't that hard.
And in that is all the information you need, right? It comes back to you darker. You have an idea of what the materials sounds like, the time it takes to come back to you. You know how far away it is. You move your source sound around, it goes away, it comes back. Now you know how big the thing is. You wonder how submarines are traveling around the without plowing into mountains and stuff. Well,
the other thing about audio, without getting all technical about sonar and stuff, is the place where you use that medium. Like I was driving, I did a road trip to Adelaide on the weekend, coming back, listening to podcasts and stuff. Some of them, the audio was sort of more in that, or less top end, I guess. And so it was really difficult to hear it. So you're cranking the volume up just so you can hear these people talk.
So there was a considerable amount of like low,
Mids,
mid,
yeah.
kind of, we call the mud frequency, muddiness.
Yeah, so you've got that car noise.
Mids.
Yeah.
Yep.
But then on the other hand, if you had an audio book and you were listening on headphones and someone did the whole book using a 416, you'd be hating
You'd have
it.
a headache. You'd have a headache.
Pickaxe
Yeah.
in your ear. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that has to be. I mean, I do know audiobook production, the companies, I've been to one that uses it. And I just hope they EQ it. I just hope they do something to smooth it out a little bit.
Why would you start
Yeah.
there, though? That's crazy.
I don't know. Maybe it's an LA thing because they're in LA.
Right, yeah,
so.
yeah.
The way you process your audio, for example, if you overcompress something, it can be fatiguing and annoying. Yet, if you're driving in a car in a noisy environment, that compression really helps with intelligibility. Yeah. And so it's variable, depends on what your listening environment is. And it's, you're trying to find the happy medium because you compress the bejesus out of it. You're going to hear.
Yeah, I mean, there's a difference between fidelity and intelligibility. Yeah. So, like, if we recorded everything for an audiobook to maximize fidelity, it would be a problem for that exact reason that Robert just said. It would be hard to make out every word. You've watched cinema mixes on television, on streaming, on Netflix or whatever, and
Volumes.
Certain things are lost in the mix. You're frustrated. You can't hear the dialogue very well. So you turn it up, and then your wife says, will you turn it down when there's an action sequence? Because they're trying to maintain realism and have fidelity and have a dynamic range. Well, you cannot have that also and listen to it back in a car or on a subway in AirPods.
Exactly.
And hear every word. Yeah. So intelligibility and fidelity are not really related. They have to be separated and prioritized in different ways.
I think we've just invented a new app. Imagine if you go, I'm going to listen to a podcast, and they asked you, which environment are you listening? You're listening on headphones, you're listening in a car, you're listening on
a new set of headphones that actually does it automatically.
Well, that too, yeah.
I think this is part of the delivery where, because also this comes up with music. You're listening to music in a car and you want it smashed. You're listening to music at home on your big speakers in a quiet environment and you want it super dynamic. And you can't say that either one is good or bad, but really this ability to control the dynamic range should be flexible based on the user environment. And, we all know that setting a compressor is so mysterious. Like, people might be able to understand EQ, but you start to talk to people that aren't indoctrinated in audio and you talk about compression, it's like, gone. You lost them. But this is the kind of thing that AI could do for you in a feedback loop of the listening environment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See, that's a positive side of AI.
Yeah, well, there's so much we can still do, that we just muddle along because we never had anything better, right? I have a speaker bar. It's a Samsung. And I don't know what processing it's doing, but it's doing a lot. Like, it's not just a speaker, right? It's got a few different listening modes, and one's called adaptive. And I leave it in adaptive all the time. And the reason it works is because it seems to be doing exactly that. When we watch a show together, my girlfriend and I, we're never grabbing the remote and going, this is annoyingly loud or soft. It's constantly adapting to listening material. Is it perfect? No. But it really does control dynamic range. And even some higher-end home theaters, amps or receivers that almost nobody uses anymore, right? Because we all use speaker bars. But they have a night mode.
Yeah, the night mode is just compression.
Yeah, so night mode is sort of like a combination of loudness. Remember, I love the loudness knob or the button for loudness.
It
just basically, it boosts up the low end so that at low volumes you still get and it calm. Yeah, so what they're doing is just a combination of this EQ adjustment and a compression adjustment. So at night you're not pissing off your wife or your neighbors or whatever, and you can still hear the dialogue, you can still hear the effects and all that. And that's that just needs to be normalized. And you're right, Robbo, that should be in headphones. Yeah. There's no reason it can't be. Apple should be leading the way on this. And I think they're starting to get into adaptive audio. That's sort of a new feature, I think. But we're just getting there.
Have you ever listened to a radio broadcast unprocessed? We were
really
when I was at a radio station in Newcastle when I was starting out in my career. we were building a new transmitter, and they were putting in the new processing. And just out of interest, everyone was at home. We did it in the middle of the night for obvious reasons. Everyone was at home, and I was listening in my car, and the boss was listening on his home stereo, and we were tuning this thing in. And or when I say tuning it in, breaking it in, setting it all up.
Yeah.
And so obviously I got to hear the raw radio, or the raw audio. It was just a jock sitting in the studio broadcasting his voice straight up the transmitter. It was shit. It was fucking terrible. Until they turned it on and dialed it in, it was two completely different beasts.
Yes. Yes.
It's always like that. Hearing your own voice is so unflattering.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I just before this whole conversation got a bit inspired because not only had I taught a webinar recently about audiobook recording, but I also had a talk today about a client who records audiobooks who was put a tremendous amount of effort into the sound of his audio, more so than I hear from most audiobook narrators. He was using a really good K87 capsuled microphone. Actually, his was a Roswell K87, which was a really good sounding microphone, by the way, and into an Apollo and running through some processing chain, etc. And he sent me his file, and he said, I moved and I want it to sound more like this. He sent me the finished audio, and I was like, no, you don't. You don't want it to sound like that, because it had this tremendous upper mid-range, I'd say 2 to 4K bump that was really harsh, right? And I said, that's interesting. That doesn't sound nice to me. I wouldn't want to listen to that. He's like, I'm glad you mentioned that. That's interesting. So we got into it. We looked at the EQ. We ended up finding out that there was some other things going on in the recording that were causing that. And it turned out that almost flattening the EQ was the fix. Like when we almost disabled the EQ, and that mic sounded beautiful with his voice. But what he was hearing in his headphone wasn't really what he wanted to hear, right? Then I was like, well, why don't we just process for your cans? We'll set up a chain in the UAD console that's just for monitoring, and then you print without it. And he's like, yeah, but I've already got this whole workflow dialed in, and I like it. And he says, well, it doesn't matter because I don't wear my headphones when I record anyway. I was like, oh, okay. So as we talked more and more, I learned more about his technique and his production. But I guess all that point of that is to say is he really did care about the quality of the audio. Like, it's something he really was passionate about. He also, of course, did have a radio background, so he understood production to a degree, and so he understood the importance of it. And so it was very satisfying, I guess, is what I'm coming. It was very satisfying to work with somebody who cared enough, and we could really work on it together collaboratively. And I would play it back and he would listen, and we would kind of come up with a happy medium where it was something I wanted to hear and something that he wanted to hear, and find that happy medium.
It's funny hearing you talk about headphones off, though, because one of the biggest sort of talking points, I guess, on our Facebook group in the last couple of weeks was something that just occurred to me one night. I was thinking I should post something, and I just threw up a poll and said, do you record with headphones, all on, one off, no headphones? It's been one of the biggest talking points on the whole freaking page. It's like such a personal thing, isn't it, really?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, this is another thing where this other coach that I was talking with, he coaches wear headphones to audiobook narrators. I can't coach that way because I don't coach. I'm not going to tell you what you should or shouldn't do, but I will tell you the advantages and disadvantages of wearing headphones, right? And I'll let you decide. But my opinion is for audiobook narrators, wearing headphones is unneedlessly distracting. And if you're really doing these long-form story reads and you're constantly monitoring yourself, kind of splitting your brain's left and right hemispheres, and one half's listening to mouth noises and random little sound, and the other half's being an actor, something's going to suffer. You just can't do both perfectly multitasking. You have to separate them.
Well, AP, you're the one. You're the expert on this one.
I would wear headphones because if you're doing a read and you're in there for, I don't know how long your audiobook people sit in the studio and read for, but if, say, for instance, you read for 30 minutes and then you go for playback and you realise you had an issue, which if you've been wearing headphones you would have known about, you've just wasted half an hour of work because you missed the fact that there was a weird noise going on or there were plosives, like yours, Robbo.
But
Yeah.
but you're also performing to the microphone a little bit. The microphone is your audience, and then if you have a thing that you need to say, hey, and whatever,
Yeah.
it's all part of the perspective. I think.
Are you saying that you can't do that effectively, Robert, if you don't have the headphones? Because then you can't really.
I think it's harder to play the proximity effect and to know your consistency, and to. I would say monitor. Yeah.
You have to have already sort of mastered proximity effect technique with headphones on, because you need to learn how the proximity effect actually works, and you have to be familiar with it intimately to then be able to take off the headphones
if you're not going to monitor, right?
Because then you have no idea what you're actually doing. You don't really know until post, and then you're like, crap.
It seems to me there's like 3 levels of this. There's like the I don't want to hear myself. I just want to perform, and I'm like a stage actor. I don't want any of this technology on my head.
I'm an actor.
Yeah. Then there's the I want to monitor myself because I need to hear myself, make sure whatever I'm good in front of the microphone, etc. And then there's you've got a few clients like this that like have the volume on the foot pedal, and they want to hear like every end of the word and exactly how they're like, the fine tuning of it. And I guess to each his own, but I think in the middle, it's like monitor.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. This is one of your things, George, though, your analogy. I remember you saying about, using like a camera as a analogy for audio, and that the same thing. It's like you don't go with an SLR camera and not use the viewfinder when you're taking a photograph, just shooting away, hoping you've got it. I mean, it's not going to work. And it's the same when you're using a mic technique and proximity and being able to understand or hear exactly what you're capturing. You can't do it if you don't look through the viewfinder.
Unless you have an engineer on the other side of the glass who's doing this with you, and then you can do that. Then you can be the actor and the thespian.
For the record, I don't ever remember saying that, but I like what you're putting
No,
down.
I remember you saying about the like focus and out of focus and all that kind of thing.
I was using the analogy of focus and stuff. Yeah. No, it's true. If you're not looking through the viewfinder, can you still take a good photo? And yes, you can. You can get lucky. It's like, but it's like it's such a delicate thing, because from an audio engineer's perspective, we really care about audio. We know what it takes to get there, and so what I do with my clients is I impart those things and find ways to kind of, how do I say it, trick them into getting good audio without them thinking so much about it. And it's sort of like, so some would say that that's not kosher, because first of all, you're stacking them, right? So you're now like saying, you don't need to know about audio because you have a preset. Then there's, so the naysayer would say, well, they're just doing a point, click, finish thing. They don't know what they're doing. But I also have to say that if they don't hear what they're doing, that's also a problem, right? So if they don't know when it sounds bad, that's a problem. So I want their jobs to be easier, because voice acting, when done well, is hard. If you're just reading it, that's easy. I'm not a voice actor. I could sit here and read what's on this screen. It's not going to be good acting. It's going to suck.
I can't even read what's on the screen.
Page.
Can't get the words.
I can read the page to you, but the acting is something that takes time and practice. And if you're spending a tremendous amount of time micro-analyzing what you're hearing in your headphones and also trying to become a really great actor at the same time, that's really, really hard to do. And I'm sure there's some that can do it.
I don't think you can choose to be like, and just doing tech support. And I know you've seen this a million times. You have the actor who says, just set me up, show me the 3 buttons to click, and I don't want to know. And it's like, no, you're not allowed to say, I don't want to know.
Yeah.
You can admit that you don't know a lot. You can admit that you only want to know what you need to know.
You can say you're Amish.
Right. But
if you want to.
But you can't just say, I want all the technology to go away, because it just won't. And you're going to end up stuck, or you're going to end up with wasted effort at some point and frustration.
I mean, I know we're going way on a tangent here, but are we going to get to a point with a smart device where recording audio is computational audio in the same way that if iPhone can take a picture that looks really good in near darkness?
I don't think a photographer will tell you that an iPhone can take a photograph as well as they can.
No, I will agree with that, absolutely.
So,
but it feels like there's been a tremendous amount of effort put into this what they call computational photography, where an iPhone can take a remarkably good photo. If you hold the damn thing, if you do two things, hold it still and wipe your fucking fingerprints off the glass.
Yeah, that's true.
You know, if you do those two
I look
things.
so young when people take photos of me on their iPhone.
The funny thing for me, right, and this is something that I think about a lot, probably because I'm getting old and have nothing better to do.
And cranky.
But don't you find it interesting that we're constantly chasing backwards even though technology is moving forward? And I'll give you two examples. In an audio sense, let's talk about valve emulation. Right? Or vinyl emulation, you know, for your master, you know, here's some vinyl emulation or some valve, or we're constantly looking at digital video and going, how do we make it look more like 35 mil? You know what I mean? And it's like we move to this pristine, beautiful, you know, flawless media, whether it's video or audio, but then we're looking backwards going, well, it doesn't look real.
I think there's like a really good example of this. My friend has done some amazing nature recordings, and he has this whole series of downloadable apps, and you can listen to this stuff.
Cool. And what's it called? Let's plug it.
Nature something.
Okay, if you find it, we'll put it in there.
And so he's now doing this stuff in Atmos and in full surround and whatnot.
Yeah.
And you take a pair of microphones out in the wild, you go to the rainforest, and you're like, there you go. I have the Neumann head, perfect, right?
Right.
No. Boring.
Yeah.
Blah. And so what he does now is he's like, okay, you're sitting here in the rainforest, right? Well, here's your Neumann head. But then on top of it, he takes an umbrella and he drips water on the umbrella.
Yeah.
And he puts that over your head, and that's water dripping on the leaves.
Yeah.
And he puts a brook over there.
Nice.
And he builds this whole scene.
Soundscape.
And it is nothing that you could ever hear. But when you listen to it, you're like hyper real. And you really buy it more than if you go there, it'd be like, I'm just.
Because now it's not just an audible experience, it's a sensory experience.
Yeah.
It's a sensory, it's translating into a sensation.
Putting you in a place and a time, which is what audio should do. Yeah.
And what a good film does.
Absolutely.
But it's not about technical accuracy.
Yeah.
It's not about pixel peeping or whatever the thing is. It's not about that.
And when you hear it, you don't say, "Oh, that's impossible." I've never heard like you say, I've never heard such detail. What an amazing microphone! And you're like, that's 7 recordings layered on top of each other. But he does it in such a way that you just buy it, hook, line, and sinker.
That's really impressive because that is really the audio version of a great cinematography or great piece of film. Right. It's like, unless you're a filmmaker, then you go, "Oh, that was a great shot with that 100 millimeter portrait lens or whatever, pancake lens or whatever it is." But like everybody else is going, "Whoa."
Yeah.
Right.
They're not going, "I wonder if this is Panavision." It's like, no, they're just like, whoa, and that's, if you can do that with audio, and in the meantime, there's like this amazing thing going on of production, layers and thought and mixing and all this. And that's artistry. That's awesome.
Yeah. Now, I know we've shot off on a wild tangent, and
that's what we do here, folks. If you're our first-time listener,
but I got one final question because this is going to be a very long episode. But one final question. This one is for Robbo and Robert, and we're going back to the audio book. So you're actually recording an actor reading a book. The actor says, "I don't want to wear headphones." During the session, you're getting a great performance, but all the way through it, the guy has no mic technique. And you've got all sorts of issues like plosives and different things. What do you do? Do you stop and break the performance, which you may not get again because this is so good? Or do you just let it roll and then try and work out how you're going to fix the audio in post?
Well, I think that if it's one of those actors that once they come back in and it sounds like shit and they're not going to admit to any sort of fault on their own, then I stop them and I say, "Hey, you got to keep your head in the same place relative to the microphone, this, that, or the other thing." I mean, and the first thing is you kind of listen to it as like, how bad is it? Can I, ride the bass EQ and try to keep the proximity constant even though it's not, or something like that. But ultimately, it's to me about whether or not the clients are going to understand and accept that this is a great performance, because it's not just about the performance, it's also about moving the session forward. You have an hour to record this. If we keep on starting over again, we're never going to get it done. So, maybe in between takes you say, hey, you got to keep yourself in the same spot. And if you don't, we're going to have some compromises that we're going to face. And if they keep on doing it, as long as I've mentioned it as early as I can without breaking the performance, that I need you to do your part so I can do my part, then after the fact, I can say, hey, I told you, keep your head still.
Yeah.
On the other hand,
does the actor ever respond like, oh, I'm so sorry? Or are they more I guess it depends, right? Some people be like, oh, you're right, I'm sorry I did that. Or others might be indignant.
Usually, I've never seen anybody really have a big problem once you say like, hey, I need you to stay still, or don't turn your head so much.
At the end of the day, that's what you're being paid for, as a voice talent. So,
and I might try to switch the mic if I have a chance. If they're on a shotgun and they just can't have enough discipline to be on a shotgun, you get a U87 out and try to.
Yeah,
exactly. I think you do what you can to facilitate the voice actor, because at the end of the day they're getting paid to do a performance, and you can't. Everybody's different in the terms of what they want to hear, see, do when they're performing. But at the end of the day, I guess, to paraphrase what Robert's saying, because I'm pretty sure we both agree here, is at the end of the day, the client's the one that's paying you for a result. And your job is to balance the needs of the actor against the result that the client's expecting. And I don't think a client's expecting a recording where it's quite obvious that the voice actor can't stay on mic. No matter how much you chase stuff and how much you fix stuff up, it's... little stuff, sure, but if it's big, obvious, movements and stuff.
It can cause you a lot of work after the fact. I mean, you might save the session an extra half hour having them stop and start by not having them stop and start, but then you're going to sit there a half hour writing
Fixing.
EQ and level. Trying to,
like you said, Robert, it depends on the talent.
Yeah.
Depends who's in the chair and what their rate is.
I mean, sometimes you say, hey, keep stop doing that. And they just keep on doing it.
I reckon the takeout from this one is, and it goes right back to the beginning, with if you're doing audio books, don't use a shotgun for many reasons. The sound is wrong, and the proximity is a problem.
I still argue that some people would be better off with a headset mic or a head-worn mic of some kind.
Yeah.
So it's in the same freaking place, just
or
like
even
we
just
use for
a good lavalier on the bill of a hat.
Yeah, bill of a hat.
And you'll never be in the wrong place, no matter what you do.
Thanks for reminding me of that one. That's such a simple hack.
But for me, the other good one is the stocking, shields. Because if you sort of get your head back and you're on a decent microphone, if you get your head back to a similar position and, use your fist or whatever to measure, you can still come back to the same place.
Isn't this why music engineers use them?
Well, the thing that you put on your dog when he gets outside the lawn? You just get a little collar. It's like...
On that note, I'm going to go piss up a tree. Go and lift your leg on something else.
Well, that was fun. Is it over?
The Pro Audio Suite, with thanks to TriBooth and Austrian Audio, recorded using Source Connect, edited by Andrew Peters and mixed by Voodoo Radio Imaging, with tech support from George the Tech Whittam. Don't forget to subscribe to the show and join in the conversation on our Facebook group. To leave a comment, suggest a topic, or just say g'day, drop us a note at our website, theproaudiosuite.com.